My name is Belle DeRue, and my group will be presenting on the topic of racism within K through 12 grading systems. To begin, we must look at the background within grading and schooling in general. Grading within school settings can be dated back to before 1785. This system has changed very minorly from then to present time. Racism has been ever present within K through 12 school grading systems through inherent racism and systemic bias. Grading scales have given clear disadvantages to students of color due to the ongoing dominance of white individuals within schooling, not only as students, but also as teachers and higher ups within education. Grading has been used for decades to put students into categories within their learning experiences. Students of color within this have always been at a disadvantage due to the ideas that white students are better students, along with biased grading to support these skewed ideals.
Stereotypes and prejudicial biases. Due to the prejudice and stereotypes of students of color held by teachers, systemic racism is present in K through 12 grading systems. This problem stems from deeply embedded societal stereotypes that educators may unwittingly bring into the classroom or knowingly, leading to unequal treatment of students according to their race or ethnicity. According to the studies, grading practices can be influenced by teachers' perceptions, which are frequently shaped by societal stereotypes. This can result in unfair assessments and lower expectations for students of color. For example, research indicates that instructors may grade Black or Hispanic students differently because they believe they are less capable of intellectually lacking. As a result, these prejudices affect how many students develop academically, thereby sustaining inequalities and impeding educational equity. In the second slide, I would like to read the second quote, which comes from the article Same Work, Lower Grade, Student Ethnicity, and Teacher Subjective Assessments. I don't want to botch the last name, so the quote reads, a sample of 113 Dutch teachers each graded the same set of 10 essays written by 11-year-old students. By manipulating the names of the writers of the essay, following a procedure described below, the teachers were made to believe that some of these essays were written by ethnic Dutch students and that others were written by students with a Turkish or Moroccan background. Now, in this article, it later portrays that the teachers did indeed grade the students with a Turkish or Moroccan background lower than the ethnic Dutch students. And this just shows that simple bias in oneself, especially a teacher, can affect the whole structure of a non-biased school system. And that right there is how it starts at a young age of people enduring systemic racism.
Racial biases in grading can have a significant impact on students of color. Grading is often subjective, and when instructors have preconceived notions regarding race, it can be detrimental in several ways. This includes impacting students' self-esteem and sense of self-worth, reducing their access to scholarships, honors classes, and college admissions, and worsening the disparity between white students and students of color. According to a 2002 study conducted by the University of Michigan, approximately 80% of college students base their perceived self-worth on their academic performances. A 2020 study found that students who consistently received lower math scores were at an elevated risk for low self-esteem. When a student is frequently given grades lower than that of their peers due to biases, they may begin to believe that they are inferior or less intelligent than other students around them. As a result, affected students may develop a diminished sense of self-worth, which could extend beyond the academic realm, influencing their overall well-being and future aspirations. The belief that they are academically inferior may also lead to students feeling as if putting effort into their schoolwork is pointless, causing them to continue to do poorly in classes, thus creating a negative feedback loop. Here's a proposed conceptual model that is meant to demonstrate the impact that a student's self-esteem has on motivation, various types of engagement, and ultimately their academic performance. Biases during grading will also limit access to opportunities such as AP and honors classes, scholarships, and could even potentially prevent college admissions. Students with GPAs between a 3.5 and 4.0 were twice as likely to receive a scholarship compared to students with GPAs lower than a 3.0, meaning that a white student will generally be more likely to receive a scholarship compared to their non-white peers. This includes non-merit scholarships as well. Black, Hispanic, and Native American students were already less likely to be enrolled in college, as shown in the graph below. Unjustly having a lower GPA will only worsen the gap and perpetuate the cycle.
In this short video titled Systemic Racism Explained, it goes into the different aspects of schools and more specifically the grading systems within them, along with how different roles and aspects of racism and systemic bias play into this ideal that students of color are worse off than white students primarily. Systemic racism within schooling, you find that students of color are proven to have disadvantages in grading, along with many other aspects such as quality of learning. Racism is found within the building blocks of schooling, the video states, and can still be shown this way within grading. Students of color have to work harder, learn faster, and conform in order to receive equal grades. This is both a problem with individual teachers and their views, along with schooling systems and the idea that some races are not as smart or going to go as far as others, as shown within this video, along with many different aspects such as funding, school participation, and grading, most specifically.
This is Jamal. Jamal is a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named Kevin, who lives in a wealthy neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white. Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded. His classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities. Kevin's school district is also funded by property taxes, so his school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors and lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds with such different opportunities for success? The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism. To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire black neighborhoods from access to private and public investment. Banks and insurance companies used these maps for decades to deny black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, an investigation into the Atlanta real estate market showed that banks were more willing to lend to low-income white families than to middle or upper-income African-American families. As a result, today, for every $100 of wealth held by a white family, black families have $5.04. A 2017 study confirms that redlining is still affecting home values in major cities like Chicago today. This explains how Kevin and Jamal inherited vastly different circumstances. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. A big part of systemic racism is implicit bias. These are prejudices in society that people are not aware that they have. Let's go back to Kevin and Jamal. Against all odds, Jamal manages to be the only student from his high school to get accepted into a great university, the same one that Kevin and his high school friends are attending. But after Kevin and Jamal both graduate, Jamal notices that his resume isn't drawing as much interest as Kevin's, even though they graduated from the same program with the exact same GPA. Unfortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as identical resumes with black-sounding names. Implicit bias is one of the reasons why the black unemployment rate is twice the rate of white unemployment, even among college graduates today. You can see evidence of systemic racism in every area of life. The disparities in family wealth, incarceration rates, political representation, and education are all examples of systemic racism. Unfortunately, the biggest challenge with systemic racism is that there's no single person or entity responsible for it, which makes it very hard to solve. So what can you do? The first thing you can do is work towards becoming more aware of your own implicit biases. What are some prejudices that you might hold that you're not aware of? Second, let's acknowledge that the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws are still affecting access to opportunity today. As a result, we should support systemic changes that create more equal opportunities for everyone. Increasing public school funding and making it independent from property taxes would be a great start, so that poor and wealthy districts can receive equal access to resources. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Luckily, we're all part of the system, which means that we all have a role to play in making it better. Peace.
In summary, as you can see throughout this presentation, many studies have been done and articles have been written about the major disparity when it comes to minorities within the K-12 education grading system due to bias and systemic racism. This is not only causing a problem within students in K-12 learning, but also plays a major role in the advancement of individuals' lives moving forward, along with self-esteem and other aspects, such as being able to go to universities and getting good jobs. These problems within schooling come down to the ideas that different races, such as Hispanic, Black, and Native American, do not perform as well within school settings or are not as smart. In turn, this ideal is skewed and has been in place since grading scales were invented in the 1700s due to systemic racism within schooling and the overwhelming amount of white students, teachers, and faculty within these settings that have the voice to dictate which students will come out on top. You may wonder, what do we do with this information? Due to this being a systemic problem, we must target the root of it to make a change within K-12 grading going forward. In order to do this, we must allow all students, no matter what their identified race, the ability to get the same opportunities within the classroom along with outside of it. Students must have the right to good education and extra support. Along with this, studies have found that by having diverse groups of teachers within schooling that come from all different races and backgrounds, it helps to not only motivate students of color, but also strips away some of the bias and racism within grading due to the diversity of staff that are capable of handing out grades. The only way to change racism within K-12 grading is to ensure that all students are looked at as equal by allowing equal opportunities to all, along with implementing teachers and staff that can relate to different groups of students. You allow for growth within grading along with changing systemic racism within.